She had seen the ocean 1,000 times in photographs. But nothing could prepare her for this moment. She left before sunrise. The city was still sleeping. The streets were still completely empty. She stood on the platform for a moment. Backpack on her shoulders. A one-way ticket in her hand. She had never bought a one-way ticket before. It felt like a small act of rebellion. She stepped onto the train. And she didn't look back. She found a window seat. She put her forehead against the cold glass. And she waited. And then the train began to move. Something quiet crossed her face. Something that felt like breathing for the first time in a very long while. The familiar streets she had walked 1,000 times disappeared behind her. Building by building. Street by street. The train carriage was empty. Just her and the sound of the tracks. Every mile felt like a little act of courage. She had never been to a coastal town before. When the train stopped and she stepped onto the platform, the first thing she noticed was the air. It was different. It tasted like salt. And something she couldn't name. She stood on that platform and just breathed. For a moment she forgot to move entirely. The town was small. Colorful buildings stacked close together on narrow, winding cobblestone streets. Like someone had decided a gray building was simply not allowed here. She walked slowly. She had nowhere to be. And no time she needed to be there. She kept waiting for her phone to buzz. For a deadline to appear. For something to need her. Nothing did. She turned down a narrow street. And at the very end of it, between two old painted walls, she saw it. Just a thin strip of blue. The ocean. She started walking faster. Then faster. Then she was almost running. And then the street ended. And the ocean began. She stopped. Right there at the edge where the cobblestones met the sand. And the ocean looked back. She had seen pictures. She had watched videos. None of it had prepared her for this. The size of it. It had no end. It just kept going. And going. Until it became the sky. She dropped her backpack on the sand. She didn't plan to. Her hands just let go. She walked forward. Slowly. Like she was walking towards something sacred. And then the wave came. Cold. Vivid, real. It wrapped around her feet and pulled the sand back as it left. She looked down at her feet in the water. And she laughed. Not because anything was funny. But because she didn't know what else to do with that much feeling. She spent the rest of the afternoon just being. Not doing. Being. She photographed everything. The way the light hit the water at a certain angle and turned it briefly green. She held her camera up to the horizon. The whole vast breathing ocean reduced to a small frame. And somehow that made it more beautiful, not less. At some point a small child appeared beside her. And held out a flower. A small purple wildflower slightly crushed from being held too tightly. She stood there holding that small crushed purple flower. And felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Lightness. As the afternoon began to soften, she found a rock near the water. She sat on it. She took out her journal. She sat there with the pen in her hand. Not writing. Just sitting. Listening to the waves. And then she wrote. Just one sentence. Slowly and carefully. Like the sentence mattered. She had written. I think I finally understand what it means to be alive. 9 words. She had traveled hundreds of miles to write 9 words. She felt full. Like something inside her that had been empty for a very long time. Had quietly begun to fill. She didn't hear it at first. The small sound behind her. She turned around. And sitting on the sand just behind her rock. Was a dog. Small. Scruffy. Sandy from head to tail. With enormous dark eyes. Looking at her like she was the most interesting thing the beach had ever produced. He wagged his tail once. Carefully. Like he didn't want to oversell it. She looked at this small scruffy dog. And this small scruffy dog looked at her. She didn't plan on making a friend on this beach. But sometimes life has other plans. If you want to know what happens with the small dog she found on the sand. Episode 3 is coming. Subscribe and turn on notifications. And if this episode moved you even a little, share it with someone who needs a reminder that it is never too late to escape.